Hello and welcome back. We have got the first event for the day. For anyone that was here yesterday, we did a panel event with three people that had already made the switch from another career into a digital one. And we've got the same thing again today, but with three new people. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to them individually and they can start to tell you a little bit about their journey. If you do have questions as we go through, if there's anything specific you want to know, please put it in the chat on the right-hand side. And we'll try and get through some of those questions at the end of the session. So first of all, I'm just going to ask everyone to sort of introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about your current role that you're doing and also the journey that you took to get here. Dan, can I start with you?
Yeah, by all means. It's good to be here. My name is Dan. I used to be a maths teacher. So prior to my switch to digital, that's where I started. I taught A-level maths in a couple of sixth form colleges, and I suppose eventually I kind of got itchy feet and wanted to do something a little bit different. I was just a bit jealous of my students that were all getting excited about going off to university and learning new things, so in the end, I just joined them, I suppose. And I quit being a teacher. I went back to uni to do a master's in data science, which was super interesting. I did that at the University of Salford, which I picked because they're like a really kind of vocational one that helped you get an internship and plenty of experience in industry. And it was very focused around helping you get a job, I suppose. So through that time, then I did a bit of freelance work in data, stats sort of stuff. That's kind of concluded with an internship with a company called HoloViz, who do augmented reality and virtual reality solutions. So I did some data science work with them, worked on this machine learning algorithm that used computer vision. And so at that point, I'd kind of got some experience in working with data, and I was approached by my current company, White Hat, who kind of spotted that I'd got some experience both in teaching and in data, and said, "Do you want to come and work with us as a data coach?" And so I kind of looked into them a little bit, and they've got a really nice mission around working on social mobility and diversity in the workplace, and doing that through creating an alternative to universities that still kind of incorporates some community aspects and things like that. So I really like the company, and so now I joined them and are able to use my kind of teaching and my data skills together. And I work with data professionals to kind of run some workshops, moving them forward in machine learning and statistics and visualization, things like that, and partially just kind of offering some kind of career coaching and just pushing data professionals forward to learn new stuff, which is really fun. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm from and what I'm up to now.
Brilliant, thank you. We've actually got someone from BGSS talking later today who works in data. So that's really interesting. Matthew, what about you? You've taken a different route to that.
Yeah, so I originally trained through university as a musician. I also went to Salford University, but on a very different course, doing popular music and recording. At the time, I wanted to be either a jazz saxophonist or a recording engineer, and found out that I was very quickly not very good at being a recording engineer, so focused on the jazz. Straight after university, I got a job working on a cruise ship, to the point where I did my final performance exam on the saxophone at midnight at Band on the Wall in Manchester, and flew out to Venice the following morning. I think it was about 7 a.m. So that was quite fun. And then spent some time playing music on the cruise ships. So the initial ship was an American ship, and playing in the lounge band. So it was kind of very much lounge music, pre-dinner cocktail music, that kind of stuff. And discovered that actually the vast majority of people on that ship really wanted to listen to country and western, which we didn't play at all. It turned out to be a bit of a disaster, and a bit of a sort of poor positioning of band and clientele. But it's quite cool, you know, we got to see some cool stuff. I got to see Mount Etna erupting on my 21st birthday just outside it. And, you know, got to see some pretty cool places. So then after that ship, I just took some kind of part-time jobs in between my next contract, trying to work locally as well as a musician. But I'd also found that having that time away, I'd lost quite a lot of contacts and gigs that I used to do. So I worked for a period for British Gas doing data entry, and that was probably the first time that I had any real interaction with IT systems and a little bit with databases at that point. And then went back on another ship, this time a P&O ship, and spent sort of a few months on there, again doing music. This time it was mostly sort of ballroom dance music. And I really hated that period. I didn't like the music. I felt that I was just permanently cooped up in the ship. We did a lot of Canaries cruises, so it wasn't going and seeing new places. It wasn't quite as romantic as the previous one. And the lifestyle became very, very, very repetitive. So it'd be a case of getting up at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, having breakfast, then sort of playing the gig through to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then hitting the crew bar until 6 in the morning, go to bed every day for months. So it wasn't really a very healthy lifestyle. And I came home and I kind of quit playing for quite a period of time at that point, and took the experience that I'd had with the data entry and slight database jobs to work for various IT companies. Worked for a period for Time Computers, if anybody remembers them. It's going back quite a long time now. And that was on the tech support lines, and gradually sort of moved into more tech-focused roles, but still from a business support point of view for quite a long period of time. And after doing that for several years, I realized that I wasn't really getting anywhere in my career, so I made the decision to take up one of the CompuTeach style training offerings that was going in the sort of mid to late 2000s. Took out a loan because it was quite an expensive course, and went and trained to actually get a Microsoft certification as a database administrator. As part of that certification, they actually did a course that I would recommend people looking at, which is not necessarily the Microsoft ones, but they did the CompTIA courses first. And that's really useful because it gave you a very well-rounded view of IT in general. So you cover off networking, you cover off some of the history of computing and where you got to. You cover off various sort of programming languages. You cover off PCs and all of that kind of stuff. And then after having that, having passed the Microsoft certificate, which probably took a couple of years to get that whole course done. I then found that actually there is real demand in that area within data, and quickly found that I was also much better at it than I was as a musician, and kind of went from there. And along that way, I've really taken enjoyment in trying to give back to the community. So I would spend a lot of time going to community events, going to user groups, going to things like that. And now in my current role, and in the past sort of few roles that I've had, I now actually go back and enjoy doing sessions like these. And on Friday I'm recording a session on how to do a greenfield data lake in AWS, and putting that stuff back out there. And I ran a blog for a couple of years and various things. And I think that's really important to me, because I wouldn't be here now without having those resources available in the community to go and learn from. And so I think it's really important to actually give that back as well. So I think that covers me off, really.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And I know there's a lot of people that were joined yesterday and hopefully here today as well that come from kind of that music background as well. Because obviously it's a very difficult time for music industry at the moment. So I think it's really interesting to look at how you've kind of gone from that into the career that you're in currently. Thank you. So Stephanie, you've taken a different route as well, haven't you? Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your background and what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I studied theater performance out of university, so arts background as well. and did that for a few years. So I also was like contract to contract with like other jobs in between sort of thing. And then in 2017, I decided to go back to school for journalism and then pursue like the photojournalism route of that course. And then right after graduating, I moved here. So that was last year. I moved to the UK from Canada. And when I first got here, I started, like I wanted a job in photography. So I started applying to like digital agencies and just trying to like get my name out there and just reach out and see if there was like any work in photography. Did not find any. Ended up working at a restaurant, which I never thought I would have to do again. And it was horrible. But then COVID happened, which worked out pretty well for me. And I was furloughed. So I had all this time where like I didn't have to be looking for work because I was still getting a little bit of money in. So for the first time, it was like I didn't have to, like I had the time and the money to actually like sit down and learn something. So I started looking into online courses and stuff, for different, any skill that I could learn at home that would make me more employable in something other than hospitality. And so I kind of went down like the coding rabbit hole of all the, like everything that's out there because there's so much, like free courses you can take and like affordable online courses. And then there's like the boot camps, which are really expensive. So I was just like trying to figure out what the best thing to do was. And after looking into all the different kinds of coding that exists, I thought web development seemed like something that I would really enjoy. So I found a couple of online courses for web development that were on sale on Udemy. So they were like £13, which was right in my budget. And so I took those and then we got like a return to work date for when things started reopening. And I just felt the panic and I was like, I can't go back. I can't go back. So I just started emailing digital agencies mainly, just because it's still kind of creative and doesn't completely separate from the arts, which I still wanted to stay in like a little bit. Just emailing all of them, applying for junior developer roles and asking about internships and just trying to do like anything that wasn't going back to work at the restaurant. So finally Huddle, where I work now, they were open to taking me on for an internship. So they're digital agency here in Manchester. So I started with them about 2 months ago, actually part-time because I got another job like in the same week that was also part-time, just doing like marketing for a web hosting company. And then this week actually is my first week with them full-time. So I'm going to finish off my internship full-time with them. So I've just been doing front-end web development with them and getting to work on like actual projects for real clients, like from day one, which has been amazing. And I'm just like learning so much and feeling like I'm contributing, but learning, almost spilled my water, learning at the same time. So yeah, it's been great.
That's really good. I think I really like that part of your story that you've kind of gone and done an internship, and I know it's something that people have asked about, and I think it just shows that there are internships out there. Maybe not as many as there was 12 months ago, but there's definitely things out there, and it's really nice to hear that sort of success story through furlough as well, which I know has been a really difficult time for people. Mm-hmm. So you've all talked about kind of your journeys from where you were in a career to where you've kind of come to. What was the biggest challenge you think you faced along the way? Matthew, do you want to?
Yes, I mean, I think for me, given that I started my my DBA training probably around about 2007, the ready available resources wasn't quite there in the same way. So, I actually spent quite a lot of my time reading books actual paper books, which is, kind of, I can't remember the last time I read a tech book now. And I kind of got myself into a really strong routine to actually make sure that I was getting through the work. So after my day's work, I'd get home, I'd fill the bath up, and I'd spend an hour in the bath reading a chapter every day, and I'd make sure that I understood it and put notes in and so on. But I found it quite difficult. The hardest point was finding people to ask questions of it at that point in time. There was this was a paid course. There was tutors there that you could ask. You could drop them an email, but you didn't get the kind of the immediate response that you can get now. So if I think now, if I have an issue with something, I can go to, say, Twitter, and I can go and look up a hashtag like, say, SQL help, and you will get experts from around the world responding within minutes to your question. And there's loads of people that want to help. Or you can search an abundance of blogs and material that's out there. And I found that the hardest thing at the time, that I didn't know where these communities were at that point. There wasn't the proliferance of tech on social media in the same way, or if there was, I didn't know that it was there. And that was the most challenging part, having a frame of reference to put what I was learning into practice. And I think listening to Stephanie saying that she's working on a real project now, having real projects to work on it's such a game changer in learning this stuff, because it makes it real. It's much more compelling than creating some kind of toy environment that you're working in. And on that note, I kind of, more recently I got involved in things like open source projects, and you can start to contribute to an open source project with very limited experience in the languages or what they're trying to do, but there's all kinds of stuff that you can do that actually improve that project and also give you a chance to learn. So things like documentation's always lacking. People don't want to do it. They'd rather code. They'd rather do this or that or the other. But you can take something, you can say, I'll fill the documentation in, and it gives you access to be able to talk to people about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think that's a really useful thing. But yeah, that was the most challenging part, is just finding people to validate what I was learning and making sure that I understood it correctly.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you made, that nowadays there's such an amazing community in Greater Manchester, but like you said, connecting to people worldwide on things as well. That community is really there, and it's definitely worth taking advantage of that. Dan, what about you? What's been the biggest challenge that you've faced in that kind of switch in career?
So I suppose quite different for me, because I've done it more recently. So moving into looking at data science in recent years, there's just so much in terms of online resources to learn all this content and people to bounce ideas off, and really nice social spaces to talk about these things. So I think for me, it was like the hard bit was like, it's just being scared of having no money. Like I had a job as a teacher, and they gave me money every month for teaching kids, and like that, that was pretty pleasant. And then to do something else, I realized, I'd have to start earning less money, and I would have a risk of not getting a job. And it was really hard to know, what is the demand for these kind of skills, and what's the demand for these skills going to be in a couple of years once I've actually become proficient in these things. And so, yeah, quitting my job and not having a stable income was really scary. And I took out a postgraduate loan to do the master's, and that was about £10,000, and I did like a couple of days of like supply teaching here and there until a health problem kind of got in the way with that a little bit. I did some freelancing on Fiverr.com, just like doing bits of analysis for people and little stats or machine learning based projects there. And sometimes I was just a bit poor, essentially. And so, yeah, that was quite scary. And I think that delayed my decision to switch careers for quite a while. But once I made the decision to leave teaching, then just the influx of like, new potential and ideas and stuff was well worth the being a bit skint for a while, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I got by.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. I know there's been a lot of chat over the week as well about kind of financial side of things, because yeah, we all do get used to a certain wage or a certain salary, and I think it's really good your honesty about that and how you've kind of tackled that along the way. So thank you for that. What about you, Stephanie? What was the biggest challenge?
I think it was trying to pick something to focus on, because like I'd find something and be like, oh, this is so interesting. This is what I want to do. But then like in that something else would come up, and then I'm like, oh, now I need to learn this. And it just seems like the list of things you need to learn is like never ending. So I'd like dabble in something for a couple days and then dabble in something else for a couple days. So just getting started on like what exactly to focus on was pretty difficult. And I'd say once like I actually made my mind up about what to study and how to study it and just focused on that, like things progressed so much more quickly. Like at one point I was doing like 3 courses at once and would like focus on one exclusively for a week, and my brain would be all on that course, and then I'd like switch to the other one and do that for 2 weeks, and it just like wasn't as effective as just like doing the one thing, and then once I was finished that, maybe moving on to something else. But there's just like so much information out there, which is amazing, but then also makes it difficult to like actually commit to something, because there's like always new stuff coming up and you're like, oh, I need to learn this, otherwise I'll never get a job. But you don't need to learn it all.
I just wanted to ask, with regards to that, did you find that actually after you'd spent a bit of time focusing on one thing, that learning the other things became easier? Because there's patterns and ways of learning that are then transferable onto the new language or skill or area or whatever it is that you're looking at.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like once I got like a base of like what is coding and like I started to understand that a little bit more, everything else became easier to pick up.
I find that's often tricky in like learning a new coding language, so that everything it seems to, in a lot of courses, is kind of in terms of some other language. If you start learning Python, they kind of assume that you already know JavaScript, like, which is, doesn't make sense to me. So make that first foray into just getting a gist of what is syntax, what do they mean by that, like what is a variable, just getting the main bits, everything seems to flow after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's things out there where that level of assumed knowledge just at the start can actually be prohibitive for getting by. So if you look at, say, a README on a repository and it says run this command, that's it. But it doesn't tell you where to run it. It doesn't tell you how to run it. It doesn't tell you what you need installed to be able to make that work. And those kind of things that you're just expected to know. They're really challenging. And I think that's, again, if we look back to the point I was making earlier around the documentation side of things, that's where if you were actually, if you're getting involved in that from new, you can say, well, I don't understand this. We need to make this better. And anecdotally, I wrote a README file that was to do with Amazon Web Services, and it was creating a profile. And I wrote in my notes, create a profile by running the following command, whatever it was. And then the profile name was some profile name. And I got somebody who came and asked me a question, said, well, when I ran this, it didn't work. And I kind of went further down through my code, and I hadn't used the same some profile name somewhere else to say log in as that profile. And they had literally created their profile as some profile name. To me, it was obvious that that's a placeholder, but to somebody who doesn't know, they don't know that. So that's something else that I think is quite important in there. Don't be afraid to go and ask the people questions. If it's if there's a README, somebody's created it, there'll be an issues log. Ask the question, and most people are nice, and they'll help out and go, oh, sorry, that's a mistake from me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of something that's coming through all of this week, is that you're not expected to know everything at the start, and there are so many people that are out there that want help. Everyone's been in that situation, so the more people you speak to, the more you ask, kind of the better your knowledge will be. Just on the point that you were making, Stephanie, about kind of having all those things and sort of focusing on too much, was there anything that you did to kind of focus yourself on what it was that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I wanted to do web development was the thing that like made the most sense to me. I'd done like a tiny bit of HTML, just HTML in journalism school. And I was like, oh, this is cool and makes sense. So like because I had that like tiny bit of a base, and again, because of like, you could be visually creative with some of the stuff as well. I chose that and then just found like web developer courses. Like, this is how you become a web developer. So I was like, that's what I need. And it's just like teaches you step by step, like from the beginning. So it doesn't have any of those like, where it assumes that you know stuff. It's like, this is what a HTML tag is. And like, it starts from like the very beginning. And then just gets harder as you go, which makes sense. But yeah, I just started to like really focus in on the web developer course. And then I did like a second web developer course that was more updated, and both of them kind of filled in the gaps for the other. But I like did one and then did the other after.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. So I'll keep with you for the next question, Stephanie. So we've kind of touched on challenges that you've all found. What would you say has been your biggest achievement so far in this kind of switch?
I think besides actually like getting out of the hospitality industry and getting into this one, I think it's just been really cool to, like I said, work on real projects. Like I've been working on one since my second week, and that's like all I've been working on. And it's like from the ground up, I've gotten to be involved in this like big project, real project for real clients. And yeah, it's just been amazing to like actually getting to like contribute to the work that the company's doing, and feel like I had enough knowledge coming into it to start that. And then if I have questions or if there's something I don't know, they've been really amazing about just like walking me through things step by step. And then I feel like I had like the base knowledge to learn the new things. Yeah, so yeah, just working on real projects, I think.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What about you, Dan? What's been your biggest achievement?
So I think I'm sort of in the midst of it at the minute. That at White Hat we're about to launch our first degree level apprenticeship, and I'm kind of taking a lead with designing the curriculum for this. And in there, there's lots of data science and the type of things that I studied within my master's. And so if I like look back 2 years to a point where like I was a teacher and wasn't really familiar with any of this content, yeah, just like how much I've like learned in that time to get to a point where I'm like designing some curriculum that's used in an undergraduate program. Like, yeah, I feel really like proud of that progress, and the curriculum's like looking pretty tasty, and I think it's going to be a fun course.
Brilliant. What about you, Matthew? What's been your biggest achievement?
I think it would be around, mentoring people and giving back and seeing people really grow. I've been doing this for quite a while now, so it's around about 15 years that I've been doing sort of the IT work, and really being able to see people pick up skills that they on them to begin with, and then helping them along the way, nudging them in the right way, and by and large, seeing them do it for themselves, I think is probably the way forwards. And I think that's definitely what I would take as my big achievements. I can think of a few people that I think I've really helped take the step up to the next level and move to where they want to go, and then starting to see them do it with other people is really satisfying. I think that's definitely got to be it.
Brilliant. I think that's really lovely, because it goes to show that kind of community spirit that we were talking about. And I suppose it is quite a welcoming community for people coming in, getting that help and support, and then passing that on. So I think that's a really important kind of message to get across to everyone that's looking to enter the industry as well. So if we think about, so everyone kind of watching today are potentially thinking of switching from an existing career, whether they're a student currently, whether they've been in a career for 5 years, 20 years, they're here because they're thinking about switching into a role in digital affairs. What would be kind of the one piece of advice, or what would be the advice that you would give to these people about if they're thinking of starting their journey into a digital and tech industry? Dan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can do. So I think like it's really nice the like this sort of industry compared to some others in that like so many of the skills and tools, technologies are new. So there's not a particularly like well-worn path to learning these things. You can get there in however you want. You know, if you want to be a lawyer, they're going to look at where did you go to university? What did you get at university? And like that's just not the case in this sort of field because it's all new. You don't have to have a particular degree in a particular thing, as we've like all demonstrated through our different paths. So like I think because you know, companies care more about what can you do, what are your skills, then like the switch has got to be all about you demonstrating some of those skills. So like developing some sort of portfolio of work that you've done it is a big part of it. And I think like in doing that, then it's finding projects that like excite you and interest you, and you do want to like go down a rabbit hole on, you know, if there's particular you know, bits of research where you've like found yourself emerging from a YouTube vortex like a couple of hours later, then building some sort of project out of that sort of content in the new tools and technologies that you're learning within the digital world. If you can create a portfolio out of these things that you're passionate about, then you're going to have a bank of things to show off to employers saying, yeah, I got skills. Here you go. And I think like it's all about that. It's all about demonstrating your work and enjoying the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. What about you, Matthew? What would be your advice?
So I think for me, certainly structure really helped. Sitting down and planning out what I wanted to achieve, and then setting aside the time to stick to it. So as I say, I had that period where I said every night I'm going to spend at least an hour learning. And then, you know, I'm going to set myself goals. I'm going to book exams before I'm ready to do them. And it gives me that target. I've got to do it then. And I've paid money for this, for that exam. And if I don't pass it, then I'm just wasting that money. And also, I mean, referring back to one of Dan's points earlier, not being too afraid to actually spend some money on this. Now, don't get yourself in debt that you can't pay back or anything like that. But if you see this through, it's likely that you'll be able to recoup the money that you spend learning your skill. And so don't be afraid to actually invest a little bit. Don't be afraid to buy the odd Udemy course that's £13-14. Look at things like the cloud providers that are out there. All three of them have ways that you can do stuff for free, but you can also do stuff on there for small amounts that let you try stuff out. And again, talking back to what Dan was saying there, when you've got a portfolio, you could have a portfolio of stuff in AWS or Azure or GCP that you can say, here is my work. I can let you see it. I've got a GitHub account with my stuff in. I've actually got tangible things that I can show you that show what I do. And by doing some of that as well, you'll start to pick up sort of good habits that will see you through in your career later. But definitely plan out what it is that you want to achieve. Think about where you want to get to, what it is that you want to do, and put those roadmaps together to make sure that you get there. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's really good. We had one of the panels that we had earlier in the week with it was one of the hiring managers from Autotrader, and that's what she was saying. Your experience doesn't necessarily have to come from the workplace, but from the work that you've done yourself, your self-learning. It's showing that passion and that dedication and that kind of thirst for knowledge. So I think that's a really important point.
I think it does. I think it can help to have like corporate names next to your name, though.
Yeah.
Like you know, it's all well and good doing these portfolio pieces, and that can be enough in many cases. But like, one thing that I did, I went to like a hackathon with Macmillan Cancer Care, and they had a few problems. I looked at some of their data, and then in my group, like we got to the end of the day, and I was thinking, we've not really fixed this here. I'm not sure how much we've helped you. So I just approached them afterwards. I was like, I think I can do a lot more with that data. Can I just like do it for free? And so I ended up spending a few days and doing some like natural language processing stuff, looking at some of their social media data and what have you, and went back and presented that work. And then it meant that like I could like use the like a fairly household name then on in, because I kind of had that attached to my portfolio. And I think that really helped, just being able to do a bit of name dropping. And having someone else like on my side, an extra reference if I needed it, it made a big difference.
I think as well, it demonstrates that it's a real thing as well. So it's like, if I talk back to the sort of toy environment setup, if you've actually got something that solves a real problem, it proves that you're not just working through exercises. You've not just done some homework. You've actually gone and done a real thing that's benefited somebody, and that's really useful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I suppose it's kind of similar to what Stephanie did, but don't be afraid to reach out to people, and those personal projects that may not be getting a paid internship. If you're going to be working on personal projects, absolutely reach out and work with brands or companies. And I think, to your point, Matthew, I think it's really important where you can demonstrate that has been something real as well. So I think that's a really good point you made, Don. Thank you for that, about just having the confidence to reach out to people, because I can imagine if you're offering to do something for free as part of your study, I don't think there's anyone would, there's not many people would turn that down. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth remembering. And then finally, what about you, Stephanie? What would be your advice?
It's what you just said, put yourself out there. I've been studying for like 3 months, maybe not even 3 months, when I started reaching out to people. And like, you do think, like, I think if you keep putting it off, like, you're never going to be ready, because like I said, there is just like an endless amount of things to learn, and you can't learn it all. So I think like the only way to keep learning is to learn it on the job. So like, as and when you need to pick something up, you pick it up, but like just learning everything that's out there, you're never going to need to like use it all. So don't learn it all, because it's going to be a waste of time, and you're never going to move on. You'll be just stuck in like online tutorial purgatory. So yeah, I would say, put yourself out there, even if you don't feel like you're ready. Just like show that you're passionate about what you're doing and that you're really willing to learn, and just like reach out to anyone who you think might be able to help you. Like, even though like I got the one internship, but I also got a ton of other really, really positive responses. So like I had a few companies that were like, oh, we really love your attitude, we'd love to have you, but like you don't have enough experience in this and this. So spend some time learning this, and this, and then apply with us again in a few months. Or like I had another one that was like, oh, we would love to, but we can't take on any internships right now. But here is like the contact information for our developers. If you ever need help while you're trying to work on a project, reach out, and like they'd be happy to help you. And just like so many really, really positive and encouraging responses, even if people like couldn't take me on. The community has just been like really friendly and encouraging, and just made me feel like, okay, I'm on the right path, I'm doing things right. You just need to like keep working at it and keep putting yourself out there, and good things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It just echoes what we've been saying, that there is that community out there, and people do want to help and do want to give back. They enjoy talking about what they do, and I suppose it's not having kind of breaking down that fear, not being scared to reach out and ask those questions, because Stephanie, you're first week full time in the job, and you've already started to build your network, like you're in the industry, which is brilliant. Wow. So thank you. So I've seen we've got some questions in the comments. So I was just going to start to run through some of them. Give me a moment while I find the first one. So it's a question from Martin. What was the useful course you mentioned in addition to the Microsoft certification?
So that was CompTIA, CompTIA. I think the foundational one, let me just check. I think it's the A+ exam. Now I've no idea how up to date they keep it. I'm assuming they keep it fairly up to date. But yeah, that's quite a useful. It's quite a useful course to go and have a look at. I mean, even if you don't take the actual exam, you know, you can look at the material and go through it, and it will give you a thorough understanding of a lot of basics of different things, especially networking, which becomes a lot more important when you get into cloud services. You've not got an internal IT department who do it all for you. You know, that can be quite useful.
Yeah. Also, another one for you, Matthew. So can you repeat the Twitter hashtag that you?
So that one was. So this is a Microsoft SQL Server hashtag. So it's SQL help. So hashtag SQL help, and there's absolutely loads and loads of SQL of great SQL people that will respond to that Twitter hashtag. With all sorts of stuff, but it's Microsoft SQL Server, SQL typically.
Thank you. I've got another one here. Can you recommend any great value web courses? So I don't know if there's anything specific you've taken, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I took Colt Steele's web development course. I think he actually just released an update, so it's more up to date, because I think a lot of the complaints with that one were that like some of the things were out of date, but I think he just released an update. And then I also took Angela Yu's 2020 Web Developer Bootcamp course. I also dabbled in Harvard's CS50 Computer Science, Intro to Computer Science course, which is free. Didn't finish that one, but it's free, so you can do it whenever. And I also started an advanced JavaScript course by Andre Niagoe. Probably completely screwed that up. Also haven't looked at that one in a while, so the name could be wrong. But it's an advanced JavaScript concepts course. It's called Advanced JavaScript Concepts. Yeah.
Thank you. And what we can do is we'll grab any of the links that we're talking about and references and stuff, and we're going to do kind of an event summary email at the end, so we'll make sure that we share these with you. Stephanie, I've got another question for you. What level of learning or certificates did you get to before you approached companies for work experience, and did you need real examples to show them first?
Yeah, so I did have a portfolio. I didn't do like complete any courses. I finished the front end because the web development courses I took were front end and back end. So once I finished the front end portions of the two like bootcamp courses, that's when I started applying. And I had, oh, thank you, whoever posted that course. Where was I? Yes, so I finished the front end portions, and as I went, I did work on some projects. So each course like has projects for you to do along the way. So I did those, and then what I did with each one was like add my own extra thing to it. So I'd like do the basics of it, and then I would add something else to show that like I could build things beyond like the step-by-step tutorials. And then I also made two like fake websites basically for fake businesses, just to work on like larger scale stuff rather than just like one page of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I built like full just front end sides of websites just to have something else that was outside of the coursework.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to expand on that as well, in terms of certification, I wouldn't get too bogged down on having certificates to be able to move forward with a role or anything like that. If you actually look at some of the guidance around certificates, it says, this certificate is for somebody to demonstrate that they have about a year's experience, or 3 years, or 5 years, or whatever it happens to be. And quite a lot of employers, in my experience, are more interested in your experience and what you can actually do than necessarily saying that you have this certificate or that certificate or that certificate. So, and again, in my experience, I think much like a driving test, you can learn to pass the test, but not know how to do the actual thing. So, don't get bogged down with needing those and so on.
I think within that, there's like a balance between the learning and the doing, or the kind of action and the, practice, that like, I think some people go kind of a little bit wrong in both ways, either spending a lot of time just kind of reading and watching tutorials and networking and having conversations, but not actually making anything.
Yeah.
And then some people just dive into the making everything and they don't get much of the theory around it, and that can get in the way. So I think like it requires a bit of experimentation to get that right, but it's something worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And like thinking of looking at like best practice ways of doing things, and also trying to understand, see if you can kind of get people to explain to you why they're best practices. There's things out there that will appear as best practice, but they may be well outside of the scope for what you're currently looking at or doing. And it may be, much of an overbearing framework for what you're working in, and it's just not needed, and things like that. So there's many ways, and they're all right.
I think just coming back to something you said earlier, Stephanie, that obviously you've reached out to a number of companies, and your experience wasn't right for some companies, but it obviously was right for the one that you're at currently. So not everyone's going to have those same requirements. So I think it's that thing, like you were saying, just get started, send stuff out. Whether you get a yes or a no, you'll get some direction to what you need to do, but there could be someone out there that's looking for exactly what you have. And I think it just shows that every place is kind of very different in what they're looking for and the support that they can give as well. We've got one more question. What languages do Stephanie, Dan and Matthew specialise in?
So predominantly Python, I suppose, Python and SQL. Like in data science, I suppose they're the main languages. And I found Python a good first language for me to look at. But then I've since done projects in R and other bits and bobs. Anyone else?
I do front-end web development, so HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for now.
Yeah, for me, it's SQL to begin with, SQL, but then also Python, also Terraform, kind of I do get involved in more of the DevOps stuff, so YAML and things like that from a configuration point of view. But I think that the point around Python is quite good. I find Python a very forgiving language to pick up and go with. Now, there's a lot of standards around it, and people say you should do it this way or that way, but you can avoid those certainly while you're learning. And then there's other things as well. There's tools that will actually do things like format it for you so that it meets those standards, so you don't have to actually worry about doing that yourself. But I think, rather than specific languages, I'm more interested in approaches to the problem and approaches to solve the problem, kind of understanding more of the framework around what you're doing rather than how you're actually solving it. And that for me, when I've interviewed candidates in the past, that's the kind of thing that I've looked for, rather than necessarily this person's an absolute whiz in this particular language.
And then Malcolm's just put a question in here. What about industry kind of data standards and specifications for coding too? Sometimes these can be very expensive. Does someone want to?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the start of that. It broke up slightly.
So what about the industry sort of data standards and specifications for coding kind of to train into? But sometimes these can be quite expensive.
I guess it depends on, is there any examples that you have of what you're thinking of in particular?
That's to you, Malcolm. If you've got, if there's anything specific, you can answer further. Wait, let's move on to another one. I think, Riley, we've kind of just covered that with the front-end development. What's the right time to start applying for a job? What kind of knowledge do you have to have, and what kind of projects in your portfolio? I think we've kind of just covered off that I think there's not a specific right time. It's start reaching out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can go a little bit deeper if you want. I finished like just the front end portion of the course. So I would like, if you're taking a course, and that's an easy way to do it. If you're not and you're just like learning for free on your own, I would say like find a course and look at the curriculum, and then go through that. And like, even if you're learning through free resources or whatever, see what courses like go through, and then you can go through the checklist on your own. So I would say have like a decent grasp of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I also learned Bootstrap and jQuery in there as well. Yeah, I found like a YouTube video, which I might send, that I found really helpful. That was like kind of a step-by-step breakdown of like how much time to spend on each thing and like how much of a basis you need to have. And I found that was really helpful to kind of like get my head around like when I was ready to start, and not just feeling like I would never be ready. So I can find that and put that in like the document.
Yeah, let me know. That'd be great, and we'll make sure we share that with everyone.
I think like my take on that is that like I think I got the most mileage from just like speaking to people who do similar jobs and learning like how much do they know. Like I think when I first started researching into data science, I thought, oh, this is big. There's a lot to learn here. And like having a maths background, like I was kind of inclined to go into that bit of it. And it felt really big and scary. And then once I started speaking to people who were actually in those sorts of roles, doing these sorts of things, I started to think, oh, actually, yeah, I know a similar amount to them. And I started to feel more confident that I could apply for those sorts of roles. And I think like, because the skill level requisite is going to be different for different companies, different teams, different job titles. But I think like, as soon as you start speaking to people in those sorts of roles and you see what their level is, you know what your level needs to be.
Yeah, and I mean to expand on that as well. Every developer that I know uses Google on a regular basis during their day to look up how to do stuff. Nobody remembers syntax. You'll remember bits of it, but nobody will remember it word for word exactly how you do X, Y, and Z. You know, speaking to colleagues around, for example, tests in interview process, I always used to give an open book test. If I had a test, it would be a very low bar test. With some very basic things that I think you should probably be able to understand or be able to solve. And yeah, the machine that it was on had full access to the internet, because I don't expect people to remember exactly how to do stuff. And in some ways, being able to see where somebody went to look something up and their approach to solving that problem is more important to me than actually solving the problem. So, you know, absolutely, you don't need to know everything by any stretch.
Nah, good programmers are just awesome at using Google to figure out the source and just knowing where to, okay, steal this bit, mix those together, done. Yeah, just really good at stealing and Googling.
That's a really, really good point. That's really valuable, that it's not about knowing absolutely everything and having all that knowledge. It's about knowing how to find it. So we've got a couple more minutes, and we'll end with this final question. Do you think there's much scope for flexible or part-time work in tech? What are people's experiences?
I mean, I guess with the current situation, that's really shown that flexible working is perfectly possible. You know, many people in my company have been doing, you know, they've had childcare to deal with, so they've done 2 hours here, then had a break, then do 4 hours here, and then had a break. Personally, I think it's a really, really suited role for that. There are certain aspects that you need to communicate with people and you need to be online together to discuss stuff. But in terms of flexibility, there's always times where you need a couple of hours to just go and get your head down and do something. And it really shouldn't matter when or where you do that work.
I think it depends how collaborative it is, doesn't it? Like there's a lot of different jobs in tech, and some are really, really collaborative, and you need to be in constant communication with people, in which case you need to all be working fairly similar hours, and it's kind of harder to work part-time. But in many cases in tech, you're making a product for a person. And so just like if you were making chairs, you just disappear off into the shed. I don't really care what you do. Just come back, bring me a nice chair. And like, it's similar if you're making a website, database, whatever it is. So I think for many roles where it can be much more individual, then there's a lot of scope for working part-time or weird hours.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of look at the companies that you're working for, because although we're talking about the digital and tech industry, that breaks down into so many different types of companies that produce different products and different services. And I think looking at the companies that are out there and the cultures and how they work, what they're producing, and finding something that kind of fits with you as well. I think that's really important. So it isn't, although we talk about the industry, it's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely, and I think to expand on that point as well, in the tech industry, there are more roles typically, I think, than people filling them, from what I see. So you're a valuable commodity, so you've got more space to pick and choose than in a lot of other industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that sort of brings us to the end of the session today. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Matthew, Stephanie and Dan for your time this morning.